Arapahoe County District Attorney George Brauchler announced this week that he does not plan to run for the U.S. Senate. The announcement puts an end to months of speculation and forces the Colorado GOP to keep looking for a high-profile candidate. Patty, this was big news this week, especially because I think there were a lot of folks in the Colorado Republican Party that were really pinning their hopes to Brauchler being that high-profile U.S. Senate candidate to go against Michael Bennett in 2016. Now that we know he won't be the person, what do you think the reaction is going to be?
Well, I think the Colorado Republicans are going to have to look pretty low to find a high-profile candidate. Brauchler was their best hope right now, and he's a very, no matter how you feel about his politics, really personable guy. This table would have loved a race between Michael Bennett and George Brauchler. Bennett's a smart campaigner, and it would have been a really interesting race. It's not a surprise totally that Brauchler decided against it. He's got a young family. That commute from Washington isn't easy. He can run for another term as the DA. The names you're now hearing are really fascinating because Tim Neville, who announced yesterday, conservative, leaves a lot of room in the Republican Party for someone else to jump in. The most interesting one I've heard lately is Dan Capless is looking again at a race.
Dan Capless would certainly at least bring some name recognition. I'm not sure.
More for us to talk about at
Absolutely.
this table.
It's still going to be a lot of fun for this table for 2016. David, whether it be Dan Capless or somebody else, do you think there is a threat to Michael Bennett that is out there in the Republican Party?
The threat to Michael Bennett is named Barack Hussein Obama, and the $100 billion deal to transfer frozen Iranian assets to the Iranian regime, knowing with certainty that they're going to be used to support terrorism throughout the Middle East and against the United States. You don't have to win a race by having some guy who's a star like Cory Gardner. I mean, certainly that is helpful. But look at Iowa. Joni Ernst was not in Iowa well known at this stage in the cycle. She was just a fairly new state legislator, ran a great race. It turns out that hog castration is really one of the unifying issues in Iowa. And so it's
another reason I'm glad I'm in Colorado.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's completely possible that there could be a state legislator or a DA or whatever, a county commissioner for that matter, who could come and run and do a good race. Now that person will have, at least initially, more trouble raising national money because of their name recognition. But as Joni Ernst and many other senators have shown over the years, you can overcome that with a strong campaign and win. And once you show you're viable, the money will come in.
Eric, some of the national pundits believe that Michael Bennett is a vulnerable Democrat Senate candidate, at least among the other Senate Democrats running for re-election in 2016. But is he really vulnerable in Colorado with what he's done, his reputation? Do you think he's as vulnerable as the national pundits believe he is?
I haven't thought that for some period of time. I think if he was as vulnerable as some national pundits are suggesting, the Republicans in 2016 have a lot of Senate seats around the country to defend. They see only two potential pickup opportunities. One is in Nevada, the Harry Reid seat, and the other one being the Bennett seat in Colorado. I've never quite bought into that thinking for a whole host of reasons. One is I think Michael Bennett is better situated than Mark Udall was. 2016 is a presidential year. Democrats do substantially better in presidential years than they do in off years. 2014 was as good a year as Republicans are going to see in a long time. Cory Gardner is a one-of-a-kind candidate off of that bench. They don't, as John Caldera, our friend, says, that they don't have a bench. They have a folding chair on the Republican Party. We're seeing that in terms of lack of other viable candidates here. And at the end of the day, Cory Gardner won a reasonably close race. It was less than 2 points when everything was counted, about 1.9 points. And Michael Bennett is now getting more secure as it goes, as the potential candidates, starting with Mike Kaufman, then George Brauchler, pass on this race. I think if he was really vulnerable, Cory Gardner was able to read a poll, and he was able to take the pulse of the state and the country, and he decided, he's a cautious guy, and he said 2014 is my year to roll the dice. You don't see Mike Kaufman, you don't see George Brauchler saying, hey, 2016 is the year. And in Brauchler's case, I think he made a very calculated decision that 16 is not his year, 18 is the year. The governor's race is probably the play in 18. I think we're looking for a hot Republican primary 2018, probably between Walker Stapleton and George Brauchler. That's the action. Bennett, I'm not sure he wants to sign a long-term lease in Washington, but I'm not sure he should necessarily shy away from that as well.
Ben, if you're on the campaign team for Michael Bennett, is maybe not the time to pop the champagne, but you at least gear down knowing that it's going to be a little bit easier fight, or do you still expect someone big to come out and be a potential opponent?
I don't think they'll be able to gear down at all. I think they are rightly anticipating a big fight. Eric correctly pointed out that nationally the Republicans see two opportunities for pickup, and they're not going to be nice just because maybe they don't have what we perceive as a top-tier candidate. So I think Bennett will have to fight hard. I think one of the things about Colorado, and certainly we all know this, there's a huge number of independent voters, and there's a constant need for politicians from both sides of the aisle to make their case to the people and restate it. And I think, as the other panelists have pointed out also, there's still a lot of time between now and the election. Other people can emerge who can certainly be viable. Walker Stapleton is a name that maybe could come out of the woodwork and run for Senate. There will be enticements from D.C. There will be local people pushing. I think right now Neville is looking at this situation and saying, very good. He looks today to have a great shot to be the nominee, but that can change. So I don't think Bennett is taking any breaths and won't be for about a year plus.